5-minute tax guides from your 5-minute tax guy. Short lessons to help you navigate the treacherous, hazardous, and totally unpredictable U.S. federal tax code. Okay, we need to have a serious talk. I've got some bad news and some good news to let you in on. Let's get the bad news out of the way right now. For 2018 and going forward, there are no more exemption deductions. Say what?
About this.
5-minute tax guy. Are you serious? No more deductions for exemptions? That's right. No more deductions from income for your personal and dependent exemptions. But here's the good news. For 2018 and going forward, your standard deduction will be almost doubled. And the child tax credit is also doubled to $2,000 per qualifying child from the previous $1,000. Remember last year when you went to prepare your tax return and you were able to deduct $4,050 for yourself, your spouse, and every dependent on your tax return? Well, those days are over, bucko. For 2018 and going forward, you'll no longer be able to get that exemption deduction from income. That means that you'll lose that $48,600 deduction for your 12 kids and the $8,100 deduction for you and your spouse. But don't panic just yet. It's not all doom and gloom. Our president did, after all, promise us that we would have more money in our pockets. Right? So here's one piece of good news. Beginning in 2018, the standard deductions will all increase by almost double. Below you'll see the chart comparing 2017 and 2018 standard deductions. Standard and itemized deductions will be covered in another video. So what about dependents? Who can I claim as a dependent on my tax return? Well, that's pretty simple, and at the same time very complicated. But I promise I'll make it as simple as the IRS will allow. First, let me explain about the concept of a qualifying child as defined by the IRS. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. Buttercup is married Humperdinck in little less than half an hour. So all we have to do is get in, break up the wedding, steal the princess, make our escape.
There are two types of dependents that can be claimed on a tax return. Since I'm limited to 5 minutes on this video, I'm only going to cover the qualifying child. I'll cover the other type of dependent in another video. To be a qualifying child, a dependent must first qualify under the general tests for dependency. The general tests for dependency are 1. Dependent taxpayer test, 2. Joint return test, and 3. The resident or citizen test. Dependent taxpayer test. To qualify under this test just means that you, the taxpayer wishing to claim the dependent, may not be a dependent of any other taxpayer. The joint return test. To claim a dependent, that dependent may not file a joint return unless that joint return is filed only to claim a refund of withheld income tax or estimated tax paid. The citizen or resident test. To be claimed as a dependent, a person must be a U.S. citizen, U.S. resident alien, U.S. national, or a resident of Canada or Mexico. Now that we have the general tests out of the way, let's move on to the test for a qualifying child. There are 6 tests that a dependent must pass to be a qualifying child. They are the relationship test, the age test, the residency test, the support test for a qualifying child, the joint return test, and the special test for a qualifying child of more than one person. I will only be covering the first 5 tests in this video due to time constraints. Relationship test. To meet the relationship test, a child must be related to the taxpayer in one of the following ways: the taxpayer's son, daughter, or stepchild, legally adopted child, or a child lawfully placed with the taxpayer for legal adoption, eligible foster child placed with the taxpayer by an authorized placement agency or by a judgment, decree, or other order of any court of competent jurisdiction, brother, sister, stepbrother, or stepsister, or a descendant of any of the above, for example, a grandchild, niece, or nephew. The IRS is fairly generous in their definition of a child. An easy way to remember the relationship test is just to remember child, sibling, or any descendant of such. You cannot claim your parents, uncles, aunts, or grandparents. One important point to keep in mind is that a qualifying child relationship established by marriage is never dissolved by divorce or death. In other words, if you have a stepchild and you become divorced from the parent of that child, then that child is still your stepchild. This also applies if the parent of that child dies. This means that you can claim your stepchild even if you become divorced from the child's natural parent, if that child passes all the other tests to be a qualifying child. Age test. This one's pretty straightforward. To meet the age test, the person must be one of the following: under age 19 at the end of the year, a full-time student, and under age 24 at the end of the year, permanently and totally disabled at any time during the year, regardless of age. In addition to the above rules, the dependent must be younger than you, or younger than your spouse if you are filing jointly, unless disabled. Residency test. Again, pretty straightforward. To meet the residency test, the child must have lived with the taxpayer for more than half the year. However, exceptions exist for temporary absences, children who were born or died during the year, kidnapped children, and children of divorced or separated parents. To meet the support test for a qualifying child, the child cannot have provided more than half of their own support for the year. Pay close attention to the wording of that statement. It does not say that the taxpayer must have provided more than half the dependent's support. This means that if, for example, the child's grandparents paid all of the support of the child while still living with the parents for over half the year, then the child would still meet the support test because the child did not provide over half of their own support. The joint return test. This is the same test as the general test for dependency. That is, to claim a dependent, that dependent may not file a joint return unless that joint return is filed only to claim a refund of withheld income tax or estimated tax paid. That's it for exemptions and dependents. Pretty simple, right? Right. And yes, I know I went over my 5-minute limit. But hey, this is a complicated subject with lots of material to cover, so cut me some slack, all right? If this keeps up, I'm going to have to change my name to 8-Minute Tax Guy. My father would be so disappointed that I'm not keeping the family name. He had such big dreams for me.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by.